Shortly thereafter, our space journal published the space solar power research of other countries, such as India and Japan and Russia. In the same year, 2009, I attended a conference sponsored by the International Academy of Astronautics. That was the IA Study Group 3.11. Solar energy from space, held in Toronto, Canada, and I would suspect that half of this room was there. John Manskins, Gary Barnhart, chairing that event. That was something like 11 years ago. But to follow the theme of my own interest, coming out of the ComSat world, the paper I presented in Toronto to that group was called ComSats and Sunsets, a marriage made in heaven. I was arguing at that time that voice, video, and data, although they were each important, the most important and lasting role of communication satellites would be the delivery of sunshine. So, a decade ago, I was predicting that the next generation of space satellites would be sunsets, delivering sun's energy to Earth as a clean and inexhaustible source of electrical power. You know that did not happen. However, in 2010, Space News published a half-page editorial that I wrote entitled, "Why Not Space Solar Power?" The editorial carried the endorsement of both the National Space Society and the Society of Satellite Professionals International. But I still have seen very little movement in that direction by the ComSat people. Maybe it's because they're making good money doing exactly what they're doing today. Maybe this is too hard. Maybe it's not the timing for it. I'm thinking, as I get older and older, that eventually this will catch on. But we have to start somewhere, right? And that's where we all are. We're all starting somewhere. None of us really know for sure what the future platforms for capturing and delivering solar power from space will look like, even though we have many good models, and the number and the variety of models is increasing. And hopefully John Mankin's designs and those of others who have those kinds of interests are moving us toward more workable solutions, more cost-effective solutions. One good thing that has happened from my perspective is that our space journal has been a prominent publication platform for a series of international sunset design competitions. These competitions, sponsored by the NSS, have not only added a significant body of accessible research on space solar power globally, they have facilitated, through creative visualization, through our own ability to make more clear to an interested, hopefully to become interested public, and to produce multiple new space solar power designs. As many of you know, in the year 2015, the Sunsat Design Competition and the international teams that were winning $10,000 prizes were featured in the Ad Astra magazine, the NSS magazine, and the designs were published in the Ohio University-based Space Journal. And in 2016, that competition was jointly sponsored by NSS Enterprise in Space and by Space Canada. In 2016, Ohio University in Athens, where I have served as a professor and dean for many years, was designated by the National Space Society as a, quote, center of excellence in space solar power and power beaming. I was pleased to take home that honor, but there was a great caveat in that. We hadn't made it happen. In truth, Ohio University was not designated for this honor for the quantity and quality of its own space solar power research. That honor was given because the efforts over the past 10 years to explain to the world and what space solar power is or might become for the benefit of our planet. The reality that you and I face is that outside the people in this room and the people you know and I know, almost no one has any idea what space solar power is or what it might become. We are working on it. We are working on it. But think how many more great minds could be working on this if they only knew what it was and what it could potentially do. And what we've been saying today is exactly that. We have a lot more work to do. Outside of the long list of events of the National Space Society and its publishing of space solar power over many years, and you can find a lot of that information on its website. There hasn't really been an easily accessible, publicly available source of information about space solar power that I know of, other than that which is published in the Space Journal. Today, on the occasion of the 50th anniversary, not today's date, but this period of time, of the space solar power patent held by scientist Peter Glaser, I would like to join you in issuing a challenge to all nations in this year, 2018, to support and carry out peer-reviewed and journalistically credible space solar power research. So that published and made widely available to all. The articles previously submitted to the online journal from China and India and Russia and Japan are all a small step toward a global understanding of this potential future industry. It is the imperative that we work together across national and competitive boundaries to move this effort along. The virtuous cycle of innovation in space solar power can be jump-started by the National Space Society and its conferences like these, where great ideas can find people who may be interested in knowing more. Collaboration can be incentivized by public and private interest in the technology and its implications for all society. We need a diversity of perspectives, not just cross-border, but cross-discipline. I end with a quote from the CNN commentator and author, Fareed Zakaria. Innovation is not simply, and that's what we're doing, a technical matter, but one of understanding how people and societies work, what they need and what they want. We have to learn how to do that better. We have to learn what our place is in this society. I'm pleased to be a part of a group like this that has that kind of vision. Thank you.
Good question?
Brad Siegel. In 1982, I was involved with building the microgrid and space station.
Speak up. We're going to have to keep you next to the mic. Okay, you say it and I'll repeat it.
I can go up there, it'd be easier. Okay. So in 1982, I was involved with...
In 1982,
I was involved with building the microgrid in the space station.
Microgrid Space Station,
On the space station at NASA Lewis.
NASA Lewis.
And what was learned there is that even though some of the people from Caltech thought they would try to save weight, they had a lot of electromagnetic and radio frequency interference which blocked the navigation, communications, and control systems. So I was involved with trying to use a different architecture of power electronics to solve the problem. And that's been sort of lost because in the last, since 1983, 84, when we did that, no one knows about it.
Maybe you should go to the mic.
Is there a Q&A after this that we can pick up this conversation?
Yeah, we're gonna. Yeah, we
We've got 2 minutes.
So it would, I'd be glad to have it, like, some schedule so that you're scheduling now to discuss what happened there. The state of the art has gone from 100 watts per pound to 1,000 watts per pound. And the response time has gone from 60 milliseconds, which is really slow, to microseconds. And now you can produce a 35,000 watt system optimized for its power level that cost us about the same price as maybe 15 to 20 cents a watt hour. And it exists. But I think the real trouble in this country, not as much as in China or India or Germany, knowing there's no education about the subject. That's, I think, what has to be accomplished.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Do you have any insight about why scientists order more scientific reports in order to convince non-scientists about things like space, solar power?
Why legitimate scientists order more reports, you say?
Why do scientists think that more scientific reports
Oh, yeah, more scientific reports.
will convince the general public about the value of space, solar power?
It doesn't actually. It takes the conversations that are going on, such as the ones we're having, and we have to tell other people ourselves, because there's no way that filters down. The peer-reviewed process in science journals and so on, in order to just access a simple article, you have to belong to the AAA or the association, computer sciences and so on, in order for that to happen. It doesn't get there. It doesn't come down.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.
Solve the next mystery here. Cool, and we need to go to full screen. Let's do be in the right place. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Again, thank you all for being here. I'm Gary Barnhart, just in case someone doesn't know my name. The talk that I'm going to be giving you today is on the Lunar Power and Light Company, basically orchestrating a technology development, demonstration, and deployment mission needed to foster an electrical and ancillary services utility for cislunar space. As I see it, it's a vision for the evolution of space solar power. What I'm going to be talking about is a little bit of an introduction, what I perceive as the conventional assumptions, some different approaches to dealing with those, how we might evolve it in a meaningful way, some of the key considerations, some of the challenges, and what's next. In terms of an introduction, XISP Inc. is a for-profit company focused on the creation of what we call TD cubed missions that are intended to bridge the technology development valley of death. We've been working on such commercial TD cube mission development under the auspices of a non-reimbursable Space Act agreement with NASA in cooperation with the Human Exploration and Operations Missions Directorate. And this work stems from an intersection of the XISP Inc. space-to-space power beaming mission development effort, the ongoing ULA Cislunar Marketplace Workshop Initiative, Cislunar 1000, and the pre-proposal work in support of the XISP Inc. response to the NASA research announcement on LEO commercialization. In terms of conventional assumptions, I suspect there's something on this chart to offend just about everybody in this room. Space solar power. Arguably, from an applications perspective, it's almost 100% aspirational. So far as markets go, they don't exist. There's no customers. Capitalization is effectively zero. There is no money. The systems engineering is intractable, i.e., unobtainium is needed. The business case does not close, i.e., there's no profit to be made. Plausibility is an enigma. Basically, SSPS what? It's not understood. I take exception. I assert all of the conventional assumptions with respect to space solar power are wrong, at least from a certain point of view. No one got that joke. Doesn't anybody watch Star Wars? Obi-Wan was explaining to Luke that he really did tell him what was going on from a certain point of view. In terms of architecting the solution space, from an applications perspective, what you can go off and do is divide the problem, for God's sakes. It isn't just one applications venue. Space to space has different fundamental driving requirements than space to alternate surfaces versus space to Earth. Get that through our thick heads in those regards. They all have independent figures of merit that are applicable. Markets, really? Turns out there are addressable markets throughout cislunar space, from the surface of the Earth through to the surface of the Moon. Capitalization, shoot, the big check's proven elusive. Sorry, folks. However, efforts to yield demonstrable results for each increment of resources invested are being implemented, and multiple consortiums now exist. In terms of the systems engineering, the TD cubed pull and push solutions have been defined, which do not require unobtainium. The refinement of this solution space is being driven by scalability and economics. So far as the business case is concerned, starting with the space-to-space venue, incrementally building through addressable markets, retiring cost, schedule, and technical risk associated with the general problem space along the way, yields incremental closure. With respect to plausibility, customer requirements-driven application solutions are plausible regardless of a venue. When you can start talking about a power plant deal that looks like every other power plant that you might possibly want to build, and where you're working, whether or not there are credible economies of scale to be realized, and oh, by the way, it just so happens to be in space, you're on a path, I would argue, to win. Accordingly, I think that my assertion, I'll grant you, I am only your friendly neighborhood robotic space systems engineer. I make no claims to immaculate perception, but I think there's something going on here. In terms of strategies for success, as I see it, there's a couple of them that we can employ. One, you could think of as a top-down approach where effectively you reverse engineer the commercial payout. What's the goal? And you go through and you take that, driven by the customer requirements, and you deconflict the critical path using the knowledgeable or knowable intersections to foster a confluence of interests. Alternatively, there's a bottom-up approach where effectively you build a pipeline of TD cubed missions that result in commercial product for each increment of resources invested, and you leverage and build on the mission intersections to yield the desired goal. I think the best strategy is actually both, with an understanding that the customers that foot the bill will likely have different reasons for doing so, and that is okay. One of the critical things we have to do is get over ourselves. None of us has any claims, to, independent insight in these regards, but collectively we offer, I think, a credible set of perspectives that can make a difference. By virtue of, by way of example in these regards, this is the set of the first 5 TD Cube missions which are actively being worked by Extraordinary Innovative Space Partnerships. It includes what amounts to being our entry in NASA's CubeQuest Challenge, the Space-to-Space Power Beaming mission, Halfway to Anywhere, which is the station as a transportation node, interoperable network communication architectures, which is basically both Earth-facing and space-facing applications of common data technology, and mission operations control applications, which really is near real-time state models that are useful for any sort of problem that can be construed as a process flow problem that could be useful in these regards, which include all of these other missions. Where we are with respect to the space-to-space power beaming mission is we're proposing a radiant energy beaming test bed, as well as providing electrical and ancillary service utilities for the other missions. Where this plays out is that this is the beginnings of a utility for electrical power and ancillary services for cislunar space. Initially, from the Kármán line through to the surface of the moon, and along the way, what we want to do is retire the cost, schedule, and technical risk for space to Earth as rapidly as possible. What the Alpha CubeSat or ACS offers up is turns out that it's a 6U CubeSat that ends up being the flight test article for the space-to-space power beaming mission, amongst other things. And the play out of having a CubeSat technology, development and demonstrator, vehicle that could be easily replicated, turned out for Alpha CubeSat, it was a hell of a issue trying to figure out how to fund one of them. But it turned out when we discovered with our prospective partners in those regards that there's potentially a need for a significant number of them, they're happy to give us Alpha CubeSat. Okay? So, go figure. With respect to the Halfway to Anywhere business, it not only makes a difference with respect to CubeSats and small sats for beyond Earth applications in access to alternate minimum energy trajectories, but it actually can play out in terms of the future evolution of the station, because you can use the same advanced tech and techniques for its evolution and to support other transportation. The interoperable network communications architecture stuff, its play out is communications and navigation utilities and interface kits for both Earth-facing, on-orbit, and space-facing missions and support networks. And the MoCA stuff, as I indicated, turns out its play out is a series of opportunities for a mutable locus of control. Whenever you have a complex systems of systems that you have to have people interacting with, particularly when their lives depend on it, we have to figure out how to make shared control work. Not just the way that the system is intended to function, but even when it starts breaking down. So, where we're going with this, if you buy my argument and are willing to treat these strategies as a given, that either by from a bottoms-up perspective with a pipeline of TD Cube missions, or the top-down that what we're trying to do is build an electrical power and ancillary services utility, what we have to answer is, how do we bias the overall systems of systems in a chaotic environment towards the desired outcome? I would argue what we need to do is we need to understand and articulate the objectives clearly. We need to delineate the key considerations of the solution space. We need to identify what resources can be leveraged. We need to establish an orchestratable timeline. We need to draw out the confluence of interests. And all of the above must be sufficiently compelling that it can survive the strange bedfellows of politics. I think we understand the objective. This is what I assert it is. And yes, it says XISP Inc., but we can't do it alone by any stretch of the imagination. The only way this will ever happen is by a whole collection of folks in the community coming together to make it real. And again, we're advocating to not wait for the future, help us build it. When you look at it from the key considerations, there is no unilateral sector options. A consortium is required. We need, from a product and services perspective, a cislunar utility that leverages the economies of scale. We need to pay attention and be driven by the customers. The near term is the ISS co-orbiting and other LEO systems. The midterm is degraded satellites that have augment requirements. We could transform the notion of how you could prevent someone messing with satellites if we could go through and give them a power augment that they could effectively use to alter their signal to noise ratio on demand. How we build in the ability to use these things with new systems. And in the long term, basically immortal systems infrastructure that will be implementing plug-in and plug-out technology and how we can support that. From a supplier and resources standpoint, we're trading the state-of-the-art versus what is satisfactory and sufficient versus optimal. It's both a systems engineering and an economics challenge, and robotics and advanced automation, I think, are going to play a big part of that. We've got to foster the market. The government has to have an appropriate role in those regards. Personally, I think it's closer to more a NACA and IACA and first customer's role than it is in necessarily driving the ship. We've got to work out the investment tranches so that there really is what amounts to being a retiring of both perceived and actual cost, schedule, and technical risk. We've got to figure out how we build this into enduring infrastructure, and we've got to craft the regulatory environment so that it is enabling as opposed to a burden. In terms of leverageable resources, we've got I believe an orchestration across all the different sectors. We've got to be able to leverage both prior and current investments in IR&D and intellectual property that the different sectors have. With respect to the International Space Station, we need to support its evolution and deconflicting of uses, foster new infrastructure, particularly of the commercial variety, and view the ISS as one of its intended functions as a TD cubed, testbed demonstrator in a final assembly and checkout waypoint. We need to leverage, the evolving commercial space infrastructure, the commercial cargo services, and commercial crew services. From the standpoint of the milestones, this is a little bit of an eye chart, but the idea is that I'm trying to get across here is that there is a compendium from the different venues that we can serve, from our space-to-space power beaming mission to effectively supporting the evolution of the space station through additional augments to be able to support the initial demonstration activities and feed it in to a broader set of initiatives that you'll be hearing of hearing from, from my colleagues in these regards. And by the way, all these charts will be made available. So far as drawing out the confluence of interests, orchestration, I believe, is essential to making what amounts to being a cooperative, collaborative, and competitive market work. It's going to be all three, folks. We've got to understand that and make it work. It can be done. Okay? The cislunar electrical utility demand will scale with demonstrated supply. That's an assertion. It's got to be proved out. We sort of have, some good terrestrial experience that supports that contention. We need to see whether or not that holds water. Interesting thing about water, that stuff. To get it, you need a lot of power. As soon as energy is available, it will be used. Are the customers ready? We need to effectively establish standards, make economic sense and scale. There's a reality check there. Okay, it's we have to cope with that. Terrestrially with respect to power, there's we can't have any expectation that it'll be any different. Okay, in these other venues, we need to go through and make the robotics, advanced automation, and human involvement work. This notion of shared control that I referred to earlier. The system trades require, I believe, an iterative and recursive approach, which is inherent in our model for TD cubed missions. With respect to the transportation, we have to match the transportation to the mission requirements. It must be sustainable and affordable to use. We're making real progress in those regards again. And each increment of investment needs to lead to actual customer use. And in the regulation, we had a consistent long-term role for government, to foster the market, help mitigate the perceived and actual cost, schedule, and technical risk. So our plan forward on this is that we're proceeding from concept to a commercial electrical utility consortium. With respect to the consortium creation, we have a commercial mission based on the notion that it's a public-private partnership and proceeding under Space Act authority. They're participants from all the different sectors. We see we're defining addressable markets throughout cislunar space on a customer requirements focused approach, and we've gone frequency agnostic. Basically, the idea is that the mathematics and the narrative understanding of what you're doing shouldn't change with frequency. You change frequency to meet customer requirements as needed. Okay, and you design your equipment to be flexible enough to meet customer requirements, and we get over ourselves. We leverage the evolution of ISS and related resources. In terms of we have to build the cash flow models for servicing each addressable market, right? Beginning with emergency power needs, going to augments, going to backups, and in time, primary power. We need to build essentially our own grid model, if you will, in terms of power generation, transmission, delivery, and the overlay of ancillary services. I was surprised, but one of our first customers, which will be Cygnus, are as much interested in the ancillary services, if not more, than the power in those regards. And we're working on a prospectus. So what I've offered in this discussion is an attempt to make the case that the conventional assumptions no longer are applicable. Okay? There is, I believe, a rational systems engineering approach that says we can do something real to retire both perceived and in actual cost, schedule, technical risk, and provide a foundation that can be built upon to see through the vision of space solar power. I thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions. I'm, of course, here through the entire conference. Dallas.
Barry, what are your ancillary services?
Communications, data, navigation, time. That comment was driven, our initial, co-orbiting free flyer, partner is Cygnus from Orbital ATK. And if we're going through and using it, as a manufacturing cell or for a variety of different experiments, the data rates from those experiments are not, overwhelm, the normal, common data systems of Cygnus. So we're, it would be extraordinarily advantageous to provide for that. And God, for God's sakes, folks, we've got to figure out this time thing. Okay, you've got 4 to 5 different kinds of time you have to deal with in space station land. We can do better.
How confident are you that that you'll be able to get it started with a public-private partnership under the Space Act? Do you think that it will ultimately need a new trade agreement, international trade agreement?
One of the things that I discovered, I had the honor and privilege of owning the system level requirements for advanced automation and robotics for what has become the International Space Station. And we had an interesting problem. The robotic systems were on the critical path of both the assembly sequence, operations, and maintenance. And we had to get all the cast of characters, not just from the U.S. perspective and NASA perspective, but all the international partners to come to the table and get people to agree a priori that none of us knew how to solve the problem that we were tasked with. However, we each brought something different to the table, and that together we could work through and find tractable solutions that would be satisfactory and sufficient for meeting the needs, getting the job done. As a result of that effort, arguably the robotic systems ended up as one of the most stable elements of what's become the International Space Station system, even though we put driving requirements on every distributed system and element on the station. We made level 2 actually work. We made international cooperation work. So is it a tough problem? Yes. Can it be done? All I can... there's the old Hunter Thompson line, I hesitate to recommend sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but it's always worked for me. Okay. We made international cooperation work. It can be done. Okay. It's a challenge, unquestionably. But not only can it be done, I think we have to do it in order to make this real. Other questions?
Brian Dolezal, Cuyahoga Valley Space Society. This is comprehensive, Gary. Are you suggesting that you can make a dent in the space debris problem by taking the orbital slots that are filled with dead satellites and retrofitting those satellites to your space solar power plan?
There are multiple opportunities. One, with respect to debris issues with respect to station, the ability to use microwave and or laser systems to be able to effectively project curtains to identify debris and potentially mitigate it if it's at a small enough scale. If you can't mitigate it, avoid it. The use of satellites that you can provide power augments to, even if you're just getting them out of the way, it helps. If you can support the servicing and augments and extend life as appropriate, or repurposing of them, absolutely. I don't want to presuppose everything that can be done. I want customers. I want to be the I want us to be able to provide the utilities to the customers that want to do that. And if we have to, if we have to do it, so be it. But we want to be the utility to serve those customers.
Gary, Joe Rauscher, spacefaringservices.com. If we are bold enough to decide that the next step will be obtaining funding to begin, let's say, formation of a consortium, we're going to need a repository that's transparent, has a financial management capabilities, etc. So what are your thoughts about how to begin that process?
Well, one of the things that XISP Inc. brings to the table is we're the only publicly routed node on the Verizon Fios network. We have a gig symmetric connection, and by strange coincidence, scalable up to 40G, connection, thanks to our partners Verizon in those regards. Another story. There's a set of we've got the plumbing through some creative use of different collaborative tools. I believe that we can establish the appropriate shared repositories. We share a very useful understanding with the State Department concerning ITAR in these regards. We have to live by it, which means that we have to publish. We have to present at conferences. We have to be open and transparent. The day that we are not, the rules change on us. Okay, so again, it's interesting how the rules are conspiring to have us do the right thing. Okay. Next question. This will have to be the last one. John, you queued up? All right. Well, thank you all very. Oh, problem.
Speak up, please. Speak up.
And speak up and make it a question.
This is just a marketing strategy that could be useful. Can you hear me okay?
No. Louder.
A marketing strategy that could be useful to raise, to justify working capital, to justify results of goals and profits. I think it could be done by some of the 5 companies that are now involved with the launching and trying to get business. We should try to work with each of those companies to say, here's something that could be product that you can provide.
Well, fortunately, in those regards, Frank Culbertson from Orbital ATK, is on our side and supporter in those regards. I've had an opportunity to speak with Gwen Shotwell, and she said, we're kind of worried about the rocket business right now, but we pay attention to what our customers doing. So keep me posted, Gary. And when there's something we can do, we're willing to talk. I really liked Blue Origin's approach. They came and tracked me down and set me up and said, gosh, gee, do you think you might be interested in a vehicle that would like to contract for your services? So I kind of liked that approach. Okay, there are admittedly discussions also with Sierra Nevada, with Dream Chaser. We have to bring something to the table. We have to deliver on this, space-to-space power beaming mission. But if we, if it rolls forward, we've got a real opportunity. And ladies and gentlemen, I am at the time limit here. As I said, I'll be here for the entire conference, and you'll be hearing from me in a number of other presentations. The floor is now yours, John.